Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an organizer and may now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast.
This event that we just had, people coming together, a room full of people that we haven't been in front of each other for a long time. Particularly in this kind of a setting with DDA. So it's been really great to see you all. It's been really great to interact with you all. Thank you so much for coming in person. I also want to acknowledge the 445 people that are online right now and acknowledge that this is probably a little bit of a different experience for them, given that we have a panel. What I've asked the panel to do is to make sure that they say their name before they answer a question. And I will also make sure that I'm saying their name when I pose a question to them. We want to make sure that this is also informational for those that are online and make sure that they're getting as much out of it as the people in the room are. And I think just before we get started, I just also want to thank all of the panel members from the first panel, the second panel, or the third panel, and then Karen and John for coming and presenting today. I think it's been a really informative morning. So we got about an hour left. We'll try to get you out of the room within an hour. But I think we have some good, important conversation pieces here related to LTSS. So why don't we go to the next slide? And I'm going to have the panel members introduce themselves. First, I want to make sure you kind of know who the facilitators are. Me, Nick Burton. I'm the DDA Director of Programs.
Thank you, Nick. Eric Saber. I'm with Maryland Medicaid. I oversee the LTSSMaryland program in the provider portal and all the billing and the development of the application.
Thanks, Eric. And one more.
And I'm Leslie Thompson. I'm the statewide director of provider services with DDA. So now we'll turn it over to these lovely folks to introduce them. Oh, you have your own microphone.
Hi, my name is Brianna Shaughnessy. I work with Eric on the Medicaid Provider Services team. I work with the ISAS team for billing, and I'm usually involved in a lot of the meetings with CCSs, regional directors with getting all the billing and PCPs together.
All right. Hi, I'm Alan Sheehan with Abilities Network. We have been in LTSS all in for all services since October of last year.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Keener, Executive Director for Jubilee Association of Maryland. Jubilee supports about 150 adults with intellectual disabilities. We only provide supported living, community living, group home, and personal supports. We were one of the early adopters, and like Karen mentioned with Seek this morning, we were almost all in November of 2020. So we were in at the very beginning with most of our services in supported living.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bianca Rennick. I'm the Regional Director for the Central Maryland region.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Gescheidel. I'm the Regional Director on the Eastern Shore.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danae Bordale, and I'm the Program Manager for Coordination of Community Services with the Dorchester County Health Department. We serve 12 providers on the Eastern Shore, and we also work with the Holly Center.
We're really representing the Eastern Shore today on this panel.
Absolutely.
Okay, can you go to the next slide? There we go, agenda. So I just really, it's easy agenda, 3 things. One is we're gonna review the LTSS Maryland expansion timeline. 2, we're gonna talk about readiness and transition success factors. You're going to hear a lot from the agencies on what that readiness looked like and what they did to transition successfully. We're also going to hear from the regions about the work that they do to support agencies in getting ready to transition in and the resources and tools that exist. And I think you're going to also hear from Danae from a CCS perspective about what kind of coordination and support happens there as well. And really, what I hope you take away from this conversation today from these guys is those aha moments that Steve and Alan had throughout this process, that when it clicked about what you need to have in place to make this work. I also want you to know and hear from the regions the support and the resources that exist to support this transition and the infrastructure that's in place. And also from our partners at LTSS. I know many of you know Brianna and Eric, and Brianna is a wizard in everything related to LTSS. So we are very lucky to have her here today. And then finally, we'll again, I mentioned this earlier, but we'll talk a little bit about the resources that exist for people. And there's some updated resources that are going to be coming out, hopefully in the next few days. All right, should we go to the next slide? All right, we'll pause. Talk amongst yourselves.
The LTSS enhancement. Yeah, we're the one who's on sighting on the thing. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. Cool. Okay. We aren't in residential, but that's good.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, good to know. Good to know. What about like
All right, we're going to do a quick sound check. That was just a practice run for everybody. All right, people can hear on the webinar. Put a chat in the comment if you can hear on the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to start over. We're going to start over with what we just did so that everyone on the webinar can hear. So I'll start from the conversation about Appendix K. And I just want to make sure that we're all clear on the date. It is June 30th. June. Start of summer. June. It's like Groundhog's Day for you all in the room right now. Yeah, I'll mix it up a little bit. So I'm glad that we got the audio working for the people on the webinar. Just to recap what you missed is I welcomed you all 445 of you that are on the webinar. We really appreciate your attendance. And then I also let folks know that we are going to be real deliberate this go around on this panel to make sure that panelists are saying their name when they answer a question. And we'll also be deliberate about introducing them as well. In the room, we have about 140, 150 people. And I just was thanking everybody for coming in person and also on the webinar. I think this has been a great event for us, and it's the beginning of many conversations about these topics today. So, you know, we will have many more in-person online events for people to attend, and hopefully we can continue to grow our in-person attendance. So with that, I want to introduce the panel that's here to talk today about the LTSSMaryland DDA module expansion planning and timeline. The facilitators of today's panel, you go to the next slide, are myself, Nick Burton, the DDA Director of Programs.
Thanks, Nick. Eric Saber with Maryland Medicaid. I oversee the LTSS Maryland application and the provider portal billing.
I'm Leslie Thompson, the statewide Director of Provider Services with DDA.
Danae Bordell, Coordinator of Community Services, Program Manager for Dorchester County Health Department. Hello again.
Good afternoon. Kim Gescheidel, Regional Director, Eastern Shore Regional Office for DDA.
Hello, everyone. Bianca Rennick, Regional Director for the Central Maryland region of DDA.
Hello, my name is Steve Keener. I'm the Executive Director for Jubilee Association of Maryland. We support 150 adults with intellectual disabilities, and our services are in supported living, personal supports, community living, group home, and housing supports. And we were an early adopter. We were almost fully into LTSS in November of 2020.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Sheehan, Chief Programs Officer with Abilities Network. We provide community-based services and have been in LTSS since October of last year.
Hello, my name is Brianna Shaughnessy. I work with Eric and the Medicaid Provider Services team. I help off a lot with dealing with billing in our LTSS platform, and I assist CCSs in troubleshooting and providers in troubleshooting and helping with exception resolution.
Do you guys want to do it a third time? Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to review the LTSS Maryland DDA module expansion timeline. We're going to talk about readiness, transition success factors, and you're going to hear that from the provider perspective, the CCS perspective, and also the regional perspective. And then we're also going to share with you resources that exist to support the transition as you make it. Next slide. So Eric, do you want to talk about the department's expansion timeline?
Yes, of course, I would love to. I'll send this side, better back and forth. So everyone's viewing on the screen the winding path we've had over the past few years, going from 2019 and getting everyone's PCPs in place all the way now to we are finishing 2022 in our expanded pilot for 2B. And we're moving into the next couple years. So the 3A expansion begins in January. Trainings will begin then. We'll add additional providers. And then the overall plan is for over the next 24 months, from January to December 2024, begin onboarding all providers. So up at the end of 2024, kind of 2-year plan is to have everyone in. And as you've seen, the people that have already joined in the 2A, 2B, and the early adopter groups, we've done this in a very coordinated manner, and to make sure that each group that goes in has been kind of helped along the way to make sure that they're ready, as far as getting their plans ready, getting their services ready, and getting their participants ready for the transition. And that's going to continue for the next 2 years. So that type of support, all of our teams have staffed up considerably over the past couple of years to be able to do that type of work. We've had a lot of success with the 2A, 2B groups and early adopters, and we meet very frequently with those groups to make sure we're supporting everyone the best we can. So our over the next 2 years, looking forward to working with all of you in that process.
Thanks, Eric. So, Kim, I know that we've got about, I think, 38 providers going live starting in January, that transition, that 3A group. What should a provider do if they're interested in going into LTSS? Who should they reach out to, and what does that conversation look like?
Great question. This is Kim. Thank you, Nick. We hope that you're considering this. And please, if you think there's even a chance, reach out to your regional office. We will set some time aside to speak with you and go over the specifics, the things that you need to have ready to roll. So who's going to be your point person to carry your agency through? What's your transition plan look like? What's your roster look like for your PCPs? Where do they stand? What do your site information look like? Have you checked it and double checked it? Who are you going to use for your vendor for billing? And bring all that information to us so that we can evaluate this with you. And we will start meeting as soon as you are ready to roll with this so that we can map out this plan for you. Because what we've learned is that we need to identify all this information day one, and then we need to go through line by line, because you are going to think that your PCPs are ready to roll. And I'm going to tell you, and there are some of you folks in the room here, both CCS agencies and provider agencies, who will corroborate that they may need a little more work than you think. The site information, your ePrep information, making sure all your categories of service are all correct and identified for your sites. You're going to need to go through it, checking in and double checking and triple checking. It will take all of that, but it is doable. We've had many of the providers who've come before you who have done this. So we've learned from all of this, and there are great resources as well that we can hook you up with. Folks who had similar experiences, may have used the same billing vendor, who are going to be immeasurable help to you. So those are kind of the things I think. So start today. Start now, don't wait. If you have questions, you want examples, we can share with you the sample plans that some other providers have found to be helpful. I know most of the regions have had providers present who had good experiences or lessons learned, because sometimes it's the more challenging experiences that you get the most out of. So that's my recommendation.
Thanks, Kim. Bianca, would you recommend waiting until the very end to transition into LTSS Maryland?
Absolutely not. And here's why. What we've learned as we've gone through this process, we were able to catch the mishaps, the errors, the things we missed, the things we needed to correct. And so with each group of providers that have come in, we've learned a little different. For the Central Maryland region, we had what we call a Friday happy hour. 1 o'clock every Friday, the CCSs, the providers, and the regional team met, and we discussed where we were, what our concerns were. And so our providers started in May, and some of the providers that started having this conversation in May stayed with us until September. And every month we learned something new. We learned something about the system from the provider side that we didn't know from DDA side. And so they were able to assist where we may not have had the foundation to help from the provider billing perspective, or as we were trying to navigate the system together. So that allowed us over the few months to work together and provide information to the bigger group so we could resolve it. And it allowed for greater successes and greater comfort, because if you wait the last minute and the length of time, as Kim said, to get those plans prepared, to ensure that your billing platform is set up, to ensure that your staff is properly trained, to ensure that your PCPs are ready. We wait until the last minute, and then we run out of opportunities to resolve problems early. And that results in, one, as providers, your ability to not bill. And we really want people to get paid for the services that you provide. And that's important because your billing is in the plan. So preparation helped, collaboration helped, and early planning led to a lot of successes.
Follow-up question, if you don't mind, Nick. How helpful were some of the tools? We talked about the slide later on resources. How helpful are some of the tools that have been provided to you and to the providers and regional offices? Checklists, resource guides. How helpful have those been in doing this process?
Let's stand to the one. Providers, you want to talk about the tools? Okay.
And the trainings as well, because we offer obviously lots of trainings prior to.
When you say checklist, you're referring to the provider readiness checklist? Yes. Yeah. Those were great in hindsight. So here's what we learned from it. So a lot of those tools we generalized. So the provider checklist, yeah, okay, we're good in these areas. And you really have to break them down per person. And we took, initially we had some kind of overall blanket approaches. And in hindsight, taking that provider checklist, you can't look at it simply as a checklist for your organization. For each of those areas, you got to dive in deep. And that was a lesson learned. It's been incredibly useful for correcting what we missed initially. And then certainly working off the guide, the readiness guide has been really helpful because that does hit a lot of those overarching things to make sure you have the right things in place.
Great. Yeah, that's great to hear because that's one of the things, the checklist and the resource guides were built for people onboarding. And it's not just especially the checklist. While it looks like a checklist to just kind of do your organizational, are you ready? It's really for each person that you're working with because it's ensuring that each person is ready. Because when you get in, it's not your organization may be ready, but each PCP has to be ready, and you have to be correctly on there. You have to correct units. Everything has to be kind of checked through each thing each time. And we'd encourage everyone to use that ongoing, not just before you're in, but once you're in to review plans, new plans that come up. Thanks.
Eric, thanks for asking Alan that question. Remember to introduce yourselves when you guys are talking. I think to follow up on that, I just want to ask Steve and Alan, can you give us kind of a synopsis of what your transition was like? And I think there were probably highs, there were probably lows, and there were probably some valleys. You want to talk about some of those?
Sure. This is Steve Keener from Jubilee. And like I said, when I introduced myself, we went into LTSS almost completely, about 2/3 to 3/4 of our services in November of 2020. And at that point, I mean, it was, I don't know if the wild, wild west is the right term, but we really had to figure a lot of things out as we were going. And we were relying heavily, and I want to thank Onesta. I don't know where Onesta is here, but I want to thank the regional office of Southern Maryland. They were beside us, and we started meeting really one-on-one on a regular basis. We had a standing meeting with them to figure out, it was mostly PCP issues as we were transitioning into LTSS. And I think one of the big learnings that we had very early on, it was reaffirmed over and over again, is they're going to help us through this. They want us to succeed. And I think that was true of the CCS agencies as well. But since we were starting supported living as a brand new service, and a lot of the CCS agencies didn't really know what it was, we were kind of learning it alongside the regional offices. And then over time, the CCS agencies were getting up to speed on that as well. And I think that what we learned early on, and the biggest thing I would say from an executive director to other executives here is you got to have the right staff in place to do this if you're getting ready to transition. And the position that I would emphasize the most is the people who coordinate person-centered plans. We had one full-time person-centered plan coordinator before we went into LTSS. We now have 3, and we're about to have 3.5. And the reason is 2 reasons. One is we really wanted it to not just be a paper pushing process. And you heard all about that this morning. But in addition to that, if you don't have your, for LTSS and billing purposes, if you don't have your PCPs in place, you're going to have, it's just going to all back up and you're going to have a train wreck. And it's harder to work it out afterwards. You're still going to work out some of it afterwards. You're not going to get all of your PCPs approved on time. But having basically internal CCSs and the external CCSs working together, it makes it much more workable.
Hi, this is Alan Sheehan, Abilities Network. For us, I think a couple of things that worked out really well was we had our staff entering notes and using the new service definition, service models a good year ahead of time. So we really focused on staff learning those specifics that really helped when we went into the transition. There was less of a learning curve. The other thing that worked really well was as we entered in for plan approval, there was a lot of collaboration with the regional office and CCS organizations. For both CCS and the regional office, there was an escalation protocol put in place, which was excellent because everybody's learning. Not all information trickles down. It was brand new, and it gave us a direction and permission to pull somebody else in to help work through differences and understanding really what needs to happen for these plans to be approved. I think one thing that we learned is, as Steve noted, is PCPs. You got to have your PCPs full and complete. At the time, the blending, stacking, and braiding was kind of a brand new concept. And a lot of our plans we tried to predict, which, whew, man, was that a mistake. Because you can't predict a person's life. So we found ourselves in a couple of situations where we had to reach out to the regional office and move pretty quick to change things up. And, we're still learning, but that was probably the biggest advice I have for everybody is don't try to predict. Look at every scenario, fill the plans up so that you can provide the person maximum flexibility.
There we go. Danae, we want to hear from you. That's a good segue here. So from your perspective, from a CCS agency, what has that collaboration looked like with the regions, with your providers that you work with, and what's really, what have been some successes that have come out of all of your efforts in that collaboration?
So our providers, again, we serve 12 providers on the shore, and only about a handful, 3 to 4, have transitioned. So we've had just a few persons that are being served their providers go into LTSS. However, the ones that have transitions have been very successful. The regional office would either email me or the staff member directly, and they would work one-on-one with each one of my team members in order to push that plan forward. The first step is they'd meet with the provider and assist that provider with hammering out what services they actually are providing to the person, because that has been a little bit of a barrier. Providers don't always know what services they're providing. So regional assists with that. And then on our end, they walked us through some of the brand new services that were being rolled out. For example, the discovery, all of those employment services, and also on our end, having to train staff in real time as we're going through this transition. So for us, our biggest provider is going into LTSS sometime potentially next summer, and that gives my staff a lot of lead time to learn all of these new services. But overall, it's kind of a three-way prong is how I think of it. The regional office assists us and assists the provider with identifying the true services that that person needs to have that meaningful life. And then we go and implement that plan or complete that plan so the provider can implement.
Thanks, Danae.
No problem.
I just have one last question before we move on to readiness, and this is for Brianna, Bianca, and Kim. My question is, we've gone through an early adopter group, we've gone through pilots, we've gone through as you can see up there on the screen, a winding road to get to this point. What's been the benefit of that, and how has it set us up to be successful as we move forward?
Okay, this is Kim. I think that each situation has allowed us to grow our knowledge base and to continue to develop, to provide more focused and supportive and proactive support. We learn from each and every situation and bring that to the table. Dealing with three different ways of looking at information, LTSS, had been, I think, a barrier until we sort of figured out that we can get everybody together virtually or however we need to do it and share screens and actually walk through examples of situations. And so each and every situation that we have worked through has lent something to that. We've learned something about that. We've learned, what happens even once they get to the other side and they're actually in, how to handle the exceptions, how to anticipate that so that we can add that to our toolbox when we meet with providers on our weekly basis who are looking at this to say, okay, here are some exceptions that we've experienced before. Here were the workarounds. This is what we can do for you to make sure that you will get paid one way or another. These are the barriers, but these are the things that we have worked through and learned, and where we've had assistance from our partners like Brianna and Eric with exceptions. And so we see each of these as unique. Every agency is different, but all of these things give us a much more ready and capable way of supporting you and assuring that these services are going to be really successful.
Okay, so hi, this is Bianca. What have we learned? I think our providers have appreciated the flexibility. LTSS offers greater flexibility for individuals and for planning that PCIS did not. You had that day and that was it. So being able to actually provide service in real time based on what someone was actually doing has been, I think, one of the things that we've heard from our providers that have been really well. And the regional office's ability to work through that flexibility and work with our providers to understand how to stack those services and how to build those plans so you can have that flexibility. What we also worked hard to do for the providers in the room who are still considering it, we had some providers who were very nervous, and we were like, what is it about this that's making you so anxious? Let's talk about the things that you're not comfortable with. And for one of our bigger providers, they were like, okay, we're gonna put our foot in, and now they're like, okay, great, we're in, we're ready. And so it allowed for providers to get their anxiety down about the new system. And I know for a lot of our smaller providers, the challenge and our newer providers, the challenges of learning pieces as well as learning LTSS, what was a big concern. And so they've been really happy to now work in one system. So we don't have to try to remember cost detail, DSAT, how do we stack those numbers? So those have been some of the benefits that we have seen. And collectively with and I'm going to talk about our CCSs, they got it. You know, the complaints between the CCSs and the providers, they've diminished. They were like, oh, this is what we have to do. I think it allowed for everyone to understand everyone's role in this process and close the gap where we had seen the lack of communication in not understanding what the provider was providing and what the CCSs need to put into plans. And having those conversations have made it a lot easier so everyone understands their role in that three-prong approach, as well as the comfort to the providers and the CCSs in understanding who are the people in the regional office who will be able to get to you, resolve your concern, and hopefully everyone felt very well supported by the teams, because that is the approach that we were taking. And you know, we can't talk team approach with just the individuals and you guys. We're all part of the team, and we've learned that once we've worked together collaboratively, we were able to make magic happen.
Hi, Brianna Shaughnessy again from Maryland Medicaid. I've found that what's been great about this long winding path is that this really is an incremental approach. We don't want anything to be a shock to your system. We want everybody to start establishing these new relationships so that when we come together, we have a lot of lessons already learned. We can team together and think together about what's missing, because any implementation is going to be incremental so that you can understand, hey, oh, we need a new report, or hey, this exception's happening and it doesn't really make sense. So we can develop a better system to help you provide better services to your participants, whether you're CCS, a provider, regional office, or DDA HQ. We can work together to find the best way to approach it. And what's wonderful about this long runway, winding runway though it is that we end up with these experts that rise up throughout time, having these expert providers that can help advise what they think would be beneficial for the next group going through, whether it's an update to the guides or a system change to make it so that it's seamless when billing or accepting a PCP. This is all very important, and I think we've done a great job learning through any troubles that we had, any delays, any issues, or any confusion. We're able to address it, and so that as these 3A providers come in, we can have this be as seamless as possible.
Thanks, Brianna. So Eric, just one last question before we move to readiness, which I think will be a fun topic. We've had a lot of people transition in over the 3 years, and have people, when they submit a claim, are they getting paid on those claims?
Thanks, Nick. This is Eric from Medicaid. That is a very good question. So yes, they have been. I hope anyone that's been part of the pilot can raise their hand and say, yes, I have been paid LTSS. So we, just a little bit of three points about that. We, just so you can kind of get a sense of how large LTSS is and what we do. We've been billing through LTSS directly to MMIS. We're the fastest path to get payment since 2013. As of just October, right now we're billing over $100 million a month for the various services within DDA and the other programs. So this is a well-worn path for us. So we've been doing this for a long time. When we submit claims to MMIS, we submit clean claims. So we're at like 99.9% of our claims get paid once it hits MMIS. And that's, I don't think you can talk to another provider within Medicaid that has any sort of similar success like that. We were built connected to MMIS for that purpose. So going back even farther in the system, about 14 years ago, when I first started in the department, the legislature had come to Medicaid and said, you need to improve your billing processes to make sure providers get paid timely. And that was one of the starting points for LTSS, is how do we do that? So through the LTSS connection to MMIS, we took a process that was manual, highly administrative, highly burdensome, and turned it into a process where when you submit a service in LTSS, we package it as a claim, we send it to MMIS, and you get paid within 2 to 3 weeks. Whatever time, kind of depends on the day you submit, but every weekend claims get paid. So we built that process purposely to make sure that as you provide a service, we pay you as soon as we can. And that's really our goal, is to how best can we get money into your pocket so you can continue providing services. That's our goal. And then I'll leave it at that. But Nick, you have any follow-ups for me?
Yep, that's great. Thanks. All right, why don't we go to the next slide? There we go. Look at the little guy getting ready to run. Ready, set, go. So I'm going to start with Alan because I liked what you said last week during your session at Max. You had talked about there was your agency had to make some decisions about what services you provide, what you don't provide, and how you provide them. And I was wondering if you could share some of that as it relates to readiness success factors as you are in LTSS.
Yep, sure. Alan Sheehan with Abilities Network. Yeah, so as Karen mentioned during her, hello? Oh, there we go. As Karen mentioned, finance and program have to talk. That was critical. You have to look at the finances of your organization, your business practices, and then on the program side, the value of the services you bring. So the first step for us was really looking at what services we could and could not provide. There were some services based on the volume of people we support that we just couldn't continue to provide. So that was step one. There were other services looking at what we could provide that might have been on that kind of threshold where it might not be cost effective, but they brought a good bit of value to the people we support, that it could be balanced out with another service. So I do want to throw that out there just to be careful. If something's not cost effective, bring value to the point where it can be offset. Step two was looking at, out of the services we can provide, what are some limits we need to put in place to ensure that it's cost effective? So for example, community development services, being out in the community. We provide 1 hour of it to a group of people out in the community. That is not cost effective for us. For our model, based on where people live, the amount of time and effort that staff have to put into it, we had to set some limits for that. And we landed on 2 hours. You could argue, hey, it should be 3 or 4 hours. That's really up to your own individual business model. But that is a critical point about getting ready for LTSS, is looking at the service models, looking at the rates, looking at the needs of the people you support, and identify what you can and can't provide, what you can, what those limits are. And then step three was identifying what it looked like for Abilities Network services. So for all those services that we're going to provide and that we have different limits on, we defined what valuable service looked like for us. And that was part of our training for staff, so that everybody knew it's not just providing this service, but this is what it looks like for Abilities Network style. And that had value attached to each one of those services. And that was very important to us, but it got us to a really solid place with the services that we provide.
Thank you, Alan. Steve, could you tell us the top 5 things that Jubilee did, really putting him on the spot here, the top 5 things in your opinion that Jubilee did to make sure that you were ready to roll when you transitioned?
All right. I am on the spot on this one. 5.
You
Okay.
have 30 seconds.
All right, good. All right. Steve Keener for Jubilee. Well, I think that first we changed staffing structures, but we didn't do it all at once. We didn't do it before we got started. We did it as we went along. So we added more person-centered planning professionals. We added someone that's dedicated for Medicaid billing. Before, it was done by somebody who had multiple jobs in our finance department. We added more middle management in our program services because there's just a need for more communication across teams. So you have to build in more FTEs for having those communications. So those are some of the structural things we did. We also, I think, we had to set up some systems and some regular meetings for cross-team collaboration. And so our program services, finance, and PCP team meets weekly to work through PCP issues and billing issues and just make sure that we're addressing anything that's related to billing PCPs. And then we also had to have some systems in place. I'm only going to do 3, sorry, Leslie. So just gonna. We had to put some systems in place where we could communicate with each other about the issues that were going on related to PCPs and billing. So we had some shared spreadsheets. It's not no more sophisticated than that, but they're shared spreadsheets that everyone could get into and have it centrally managed so that people could communicate. Here are the ongoing issues. You can't just rely on LTSS to track your issues, because if you don't have your PCP approved, it's not in there, right? So you need to be able to track, your finance department needs to be able to track, here's the revenue that we accrued when that service was provided, even if we weren't able to bill it yet, because we're going to bill it eventually. So you've got different categories of accrued revenue. You've got, the service has been provided, but it hasn't been billed. It's been billed, but it hasn't been paid, and it's been billed and it's been paid. So you've got those different categories that you have to start, thinking about your finances in a different way, and your teams need to be able to communicate with each other about each of those issues consistently so you can follow it up and be a squeaky wheel all the time.
Steve. Steve, Alan, real quick on this one. We talked a lot about teamwork, collaboration in the last panel. And I'm curious, how, on a scale of 1 to 10 for both of you, how important was communication and collaboration with the region and the CCS to set you up for success going into LTSS?
Steve from Jubilee, I'd say it's about an 11. And like I said earlier, we relied on the region heavily early on. And some of the things the CCSs have been doing recently that have been really fantastic, like I'm going to give a shout out to Mars. They've been sending regular emails to us with changes that are coming up and things that they're following and they want attention from us on. Super helpful to have that proactive approach from CCS agencies. So yeah, that communication is essential.
Alan Sheehan, Abilities Network, I would say the same. Collaboration's key. I think one thing with the new service definitions in LTSS is that there are a lot of unknowns, and in some cases, no one has the answer. And that's where collaboration comes in. And kind of the cool thing about that is nobody has the answer. So you can get really creative. And when you have everybody around the table, that's where some really cool stuff can happen for people.
Thanks, Alan. So Kim, Bianca, and Brianna, what's going on behind the scenes at the region and at Medicaid, LTSS, to ensure the success as providers move into LTSS?
Thank you, Nick. This is Kim. So behind the scenes, we are taking a look at the information that we have for your agency and really looking and assessing. We're meeting with our management team who is going to be supporting you in these transitions, both for our CCS agencies and our provider agencies. And, I want to give a shout out to what Steve and Alan were just saying about the collaboration and interaction and synergy that happens there, because we have seen the really positive net effects of the interaction with providers and CCS agencies when everybody's working on that common goal. And it has improved, I think, and what I'm hearing from both providers and CCS agencies, folks feel a lot better about each other. The other sort of background things that we're looking at, so in terms of anticipating exceptions and how to work through those, so we have a designated staff person who is every day, generally twice a day, reviewing exceptions and trying to provide guidance on what we may be seeing, what we know is the workaround. We may be reaching out to you to say, okay, we see there's an exception. We can't see the error code. What does it say? And then with many of these, we can figure it out. If it needs to be escalated, we're going to be in direct contact with our friends here. And we're going to help source what makes sense. And there are some things that we've learned, particularly in terms of involvement with EDD, let's say, or there are a few wonky things that happen, and we can prepare you for those. So there was a weird thing that happened with a couple of our earlier folks who came in, our providers that came in, where MMIS had an odd code thing that backed up all of the payments. They were all stuck, every single one of them, for a couple of providers. It was able to get fixed. It was able to get fixed quickly. They got paid. So what we can, so behind the scenes, we're going to make sure that you're going to get the support you need and that you're going to get paid.
This is Bianca. I'll just add a little bit to what Kim said. We also do a daily pull, a weekly pull, and a monthly pull of PCPs. So our reviewers know what PCPs are due and when they're due, and we try to get to each of our plans by the APD. We're not always there yet, but we're trying. But it does help us organize the work that we do, and we're able to flag those plans so they're not sitting. We've also been able to openly communicate with our providers to say, hey, if you know something is coming up and we've not gotten to it, let us know. We want to catch it before it does get to that point where we have to try to fix something. Let us know if something is on fire. Let us know so we can get to a plan. If it's a revised plan because something has to move, we do that. There's also a lot of, again, checking with your providers regarding those MA numbers and making sure that those sites are correct. A lot of education with the teams, because you still have those PCI SMA numbers, and then we have those EPREP MA numbers, and educating the providers and the coordinators to ensure that we have the right number, because that makes a big difference in whether or not your claim is going to be paid or not. So those are and we've educated our teams. How do we go through our PCPs? What is allowed? What are the hills to not die on? I know I heard a lot from people today about clarifications, but we're working on educating our reviewers to ask those questions so we don't have too many clarifications. We're going to continue to work with our CCSs so they understand what it is we're looking at to reduce those clarifications. We do not want to send those plans back. We want a full, complete plan that we can look, we can check off, we can ensure that you're within waiver limits, the services are correct, the MA number is correct, and we really just want to go in and hit approve. So you guys can provide the service and you can get paid. So just continue to, if we miss something, let us know. We do have our internal checks and balances. We've gotten a lot of new positions to be able to support this effort, and we're continuing to fill those. As Kim says, every region now has someone dedicated just to look at those LTSS exceptions and to provide that support. So those are some of the things that we're doing, and as we learn and grow, we will continue to tweak and train to make sure that we can continue to support this process.
Hi, I'm Brianna Shaughnessy, again, Medicaid Provider Services. So behind the scenes, we're doing quite a lot. We're doing a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication. I felt the panelists have mentioned it multiple times, but that's 80% of the work that we're doing is just collaborating and communicating. A lot of the things that we've done, that the CCSs and the ROs are, they're working on making sure that your MA is set up, or they're making sure that the PCPs are good to go. We also help in that sense. We also help with all the exceptions. You're billing an LTSS, we're going to see those exceptions. We're the first people that are going to say, hey, you're getting a lot of exceptions. I'm seeing there's a lot of site not authorized or whatever exception. I think there's something wrong with the PCP. And then we can work out who we need to contact, whether it's the CCS or the regional office, and then obviously the provider to get through these exceptions to make sure that you guys get paid as promptly as possible. Another thing that we do behind the scenes is help identify any system enhancements that we can do to make anybody's jobs easier, whether it's the providers, the CCSs, the ROs. We want to make the system as easy to use, as friendly, as possible. So anytime we identify something, we work with our experts. We'll work with expert providers, or we'll work with expert CCSs or ROs, and we will talk through what the need is and figure out whether we need to do a process change, a policy change, or if we need a system change. And then if it's a system change, we make sure that we get that prioritized so that the next group that comes in doesn't have to go through the longer work to get to where they need to be. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Brianna. So Danae, I haven't forgot about you because there's one other readiness factor up there, PCP. And word on the street is that the PCP has to be quote unquote perfect before it goes into LTSS. What does that really mean? And what does that look like in working with the providers to make sure that what gets submitted to the region is ready to go into LTSS?
Hi again, this is Danae. So PCPs, in my opinion, are never perfect. There's always room to improve. But a darn close to perfect PCP is one that truly and honestly explains that person's outcomes, goals, and where they see themselves going over that next year. So in my eyes, that's every focus area completed completely. That's outcomes that are matching with each service and that are realistic for that person and for that provider to implement and assist that person in achieving that goal. That is also a service off that is detailed with a fabulous scope, and also all of the calculations are correct. Every document must align. That HRSA better be complete. If it's a 3 or higher, it is a clinical review. And most importantly, it's that all of the documents are uploaded. So that SIP, that DSAT, cost detail for our providers that are not fully into LTSS. And as far as the important factors, that was the second question.
I think you answered a lot of those questions, Danae. Sounds like you've got a strict ship over there on the Eastern Shore.
We run a tight ship in Dorchester County. And color-coded.
No, I think that's great. I think from the provider perspective, I think we hear PCP's got to be perfect, right? What does that actually mean, right? We know that there's no such thing as perfect, but what is the work that you all had to do with the CCS to make sure that you had as minimal exceptions as possible when you went into LTSS?
For us, oh, thank you. Yeah, Alan Sheehan, Abilities Network. Thank you, Steve, for the reminder. One, it has to reflect the person. That's key. So whatever services we had in there, we had to have a clear path from who the person is, what they want to accomplish, to the services we're going to provide. One of the things, as was mentioned, there's a lot of different paperwork that goes along with it. So what we've done to ensure that all those things are included properly, we've actually centralized how that information gets processed and who completes what. And that has been a change for us. Initially, we started off and we had our program staff individually. They'd oversee a team and would manage each plan. That really blended more the administrative and program pieces in a way that we didn't like. The administrative is too easy for the administrative pieces to overshadow the program role. So we've shifted that to a centralized location who then makes sure all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, and has that direct contact with CCSs and regional offices to work through any differences. But really, I don't have much different than was shared because those are all the required documents.
Can I add to that? So Steve Keener from Jubilee. Thanks, Alan. One of the difficult things we're talking about PCPs is we're talking about a very qualitative document, and we're also talking about a very technical document. And I think the question for how is it going to get through LTSS is really the technical question. So I don't want to ignore the importance of person-centered planning, but I'll tell you some of the things that we got hung up on the technical side at the beginning was, and this is for really for residential. We were doing it in supported living, but it's essentially identical to community living group home for LTSS purposes. We got hung up over and over again on the wrong address in the system. I hear some head nodding and some laughing in the audience here. People have seen this. So if the address was wrong, wrong one selected from the drop down, you ended up with someone in the wrong house, and that changed the rate. And then if you went ahead with that and accepted the plan and went ahead and billed on it, then you had to go back and fix it later. And then another thing that we ran into was hours, or I should say quarter hours, if you're doing with personal supports. Sometimes you have 16 hours, that should be 64 quarter hours, right? 64 units. So one thing that we had to really get clear on, this is one of our aha moments, was before we approve it, we need to make sure before we accept it as a provider in LTSS, we need to make sure that every one of those things is right, because it's much easier to reject it and get it clarified and fixed than to go ahead and accept it and bill it and then fix it later.
Thanks, Steve. So we have about 5 minutes, and I know time flew by. I want to go to the next slide, and I want to real quick talk about some resources. So Kim, you heard a lot of people today talk about tools, resources. You heard things that Steve and his agency had to do. You heard some of the work that Danae is doing with agencies and Alan's doing. Are these resources helpful in that? And where can you find them? And would you recommend using them?
This is Kim, and yes to all of the above. The resources are amazing and are really built on the experiences of the providers that have gone before, our early adopters group for the playbook, the checklist, any of those resources, any of these trainings, they are available to you on the DDA website. If for some reason you cannot find them, reach out to your regional office. We will make sure that you have those tools that you need. And if you have things that you think would be helpful to add, we want to include those as well, because I think there is plenty of room for your experiences to be shared in a positive, productive way. We can give examples for things. Not only all the things that have been discussed, but some of the technical things, related to how do you work with your information billing vendor to upload information so that they can be able to just go ahead and send your billing directly in rather than having to go from you. So that's the API credential option. And there are some providers who've had some really good experiences there. The other thing I want to just mention here is if you are thinking about doing this, I want to encourage you very strongly to be prepared to bill weekly or every 2 weeks. That will allow your team of folks at the region, as well as our colleagues at ISAS, to be able to assist you to catch any issues early on. So all of these things are part of this whole toolbox, build on the experiences of folks before, and also reach out early. If there is an issue, don't just think, oh, well, I guess this will work out. I guess it'll be okay. Please let us know immediately so we can help you resolve things. So take advantage of all of these resources and let us know if there's something that's missing, that you feel like there needs to be more information, more guidance, more opportunities to work through some of these things with the braiding, stacking, blending. I can't tell you how much that is really going to help improve the way in which you're able to provide those services to folks. So those are the few things that I can think of off the top of my head, Nick.
Thanks, Kim. So Brianna, one question for you, and I might put you on the spot, but up on the resource screen, it says LTSS Maryland Billing Exceptions Guide coming soon. Did you want to tease that at all?
Yes, I do. This is Brianna, Medicaid Provider Services again. So over the last few months, we've been working with the DDA staff and then my team as well to create an exceptions guide. This is a very comprehensive document that will go over every single exception that you could possibly come across. It's going to explain why it's happened, what is the core reason that you're getting it, and it's going to go through every single step that you need to do to resolve this exception, because the goal of this is that you guys get paid as promptly as possible, and we want it to arm you with a tool that will give you all that information. And if it's an exception that you cannot resolve, we also are including exactly who you need to escalate it to get this this exception resolved. Such things that would be PCP corrections, we give you that direction. If it's eligibility related exceptions, we tell you where to go for that. If it's a billing error related exception, we tell you exactly how to resolve it. So I'm very excited about getting this document released, and I will definitely do a demo for anybody who wants it, and I'll tell you all about it. So I'm excited to get that one out there for you guys.
Brianna, that sounds like it's going to be really helpful.
I hope so.
All right, so we're about to wrap, but I got one question for both Steve and Alan. So what is one piece of advice that you would give your colleagues who are anxious to transition into LTSS?
Alan Sheehan, Abilities Network. Don't do it alone. Lean on your colleagues, lean on CCS's DDA, get support. There are a lot of lessons learned, and when you have that support, you can be very successful with it.
Steve Keener, Jubilee. My recommendation is, it's just the recommendation to anybody who's in leadership, which is make sure you have the right people in place and get the right training for them. You can do it.
You can do it. We agree. I just want to thank you all for being on the panel. You've been fantastic. I mean, this could be a conversation we could have all day long, but we only had an hour and 15 minutes. But like I said earlier, this isn't the end of these conversations. I think these are going to be ongoing, continued. We'll build upon them. And I think you're going to continue to hear from colleagues, from DDA, from CCS. I think is when we work as a team through these expansion, person-centered planning, we come out stronger in the end. So again, I just want to thank everybody that was online. I hope that this panel was a little easier to follow than maybe the first one. And I also want to thank every one of you that came in person today. It was fantastic seeing every single one of you. So have a great day, everybody.